Okay, the recording is in progress. We're back again. This is Andrew Williams Jr. with part 2 of today's presentation on this historic July the 28th of 2021 for the Buffalo Soldiers Remembrance and Memorial. So again, let me ask you, Phil Fixico, are you ready to proceed? Or Avon, are you ready to proceed?
Phil Fixico, I'm ready to proceed, or, if Avon
Yes.
wants to go.
So please go right ahead, Phil. You began, so we'll let you finish. Go right ahead.
Okay. I will begin with a poem called Mama America. Mama America. Africa is grandma now. Mama, mommy, we need your milk of understanding while we learn to understand ourselves. We need your unconditional love and the magic mercy of your maternal instinct. Let us shout for joy as we pass through your gates and kiss the ground where you gave us birth and breath. Mama America, Mama America, show us your freedom mountain. Let us climb the stairs. Guide us along your lighted path that leads to our transcendence. Mother, we will be good children. Just let us rest and grow close upon your breast. Mama America. I have been asked to touch on Maroons, and Maroons are, the definition of a Maroon would be someone enslaved who escaped slavery. And that is level number one. What they call petite marriage would be someone enslaved who started breaking up the tools and showing resistance in some way. The highest level of marriage is Haiti. Not only were they enslaved, not only did they escape, not only did they form alliances, but they turned in freedom fighting societies and faced their former enslavers, fought them. And what a high level of marriage is to do that and win a treaty recognizing your freedom. In Haiti, the highest level of marriage, one reason why they are targeted by the world with and in the condition is because not only did they win by a treaty, they won a country. So Maroons first recorded in the Western Hemisphere were on Hispaniola in 1502. However, in the territory that would be the United States, they came here 80 years before Jamestown. In 1526, a settlement called San Miguel de Gualdape was founded by Lucas Vasquez de Ayllon in South Carolina, long before Jamestown or Plymouth Rock. It consisted of 500 Spaniards and 100 enslaved Africans. The Spaniards began to die from disease and starvation, and the slaves, enslaved people, with the help of indigenous people, revolted, and they fled into the southeast. So you find copper colored, dark colored Indians throughout the southeast. This could be one contribution that was made of melanin to the our indigenous brothers and sisters. Now, what does it mean to be a Seminole Maroon descendant? Native Americans believe that for every illness there is a cure. And for every person, there is a purpose. I believe for right now, my purpose is to talk about my ancestors, the Seminole Maroons. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took us to the mountaintop and showed us the promised land, the story of my ancestors was still locked in the stone upon which he stood. The truth of their story is the medicine that we need to complete our promised land journey. That journey about them is that they were American patriots, not by choice, but by circumstance. They didn't have the leisure of meeting in meeting halls and dressed in finery to decide what they should do in the face of imminent oppression. I speak of my grandmother's people who fought an endless war of homeland security. I think of the women and children at Fort Negro who were doomed to be destroyed. They were freedom fighters. Where is their honor guard? I see two tribal peoples who came together from two nature civilizations. One group was displaced because they were the first nation, and the other group, torn from Africa, brought here without their consent, was obliged to be the kidnapped forced nation. Undeniably, these two formed an alliance out of necessity. They would, for a time, fight together, die together, and survive together in a society under constant stress, living as embattled descendants of traumatic heritages. We must free their story from the stone and the stories of those who sought to help them. Only in this manner can their rightful place in history prevail as true American patriots. These are my feelings and the reasons why I work to educate, promote, and increase awareness regarding African Native Americans in the Americas. It is my duty to do so. Uh, I would take questions. I have much more, but I would take questions at this point or comments.
Well, thank you, Phil. But again, we have a new recording. So please state clearly your name and your contact information for the audience, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Yes, I am Phil Fixico, and my contact information would be email REFIXICO@AOL.com. I have 352 blogs on Facebook page, Phil Fixico, that have been read in 184 countries. And at least the people have looked at them. I don't know if they read them. So hopefully that will, my name and my contact.
Thank you. Now the floor is open for any comments or questions, and then we'll get to you, Abram. The floor is open. Any comments or questions?
Is that R as in Robert, EFIXICO?
Correct. It's Aura as in Robert, EFIXICO at AOL.com.
Okay, thank you.
So no more questions or comments. Would you want to move on to the next speaker or come back to me, or you want me to?
Well, thank you. I was trying to get myself unmuted. Yes, thank you, Phil Fixico. I'd like to first ask if Abram is here and ready for his presentation. He can proceed. If not, then you can proceed, Phil. So Abram, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, my computer seems to be lagging quite a bit. And so I think if I screen shared, it would definitely slow it down much more. I won't have any visuals unless you want me to email them to you, Mr. Williams.
Yes, if you email them to me, I'll be happy to share.
All right, so I'm gonna email them to you, and then I'll go right after that. So Phil, you wanted to continue.
Yes, please, Phil. Now's your
Okay.
time. Please go right ahead.
Okay, so I spoke about the alliance between Africans and indigenous people. Well, in truth, there were Indians and there were Indians. In my reading of history, I discovered that when, through the doctrine of discovery, the European Christians invaded, they had the permission to anyone who wasn't a European Christian. They could slave, they could enslave, they could take everything they had, and that the limits of their power went to as far as they could
You're
see.
correct.
All right.
Hello?
Welcome all to the planning session. Late.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello, Phil, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Am I heard a voice came in and I stopped because I thought that, so should I continue or you have another speaker?
No, please go right ahead. Phil, that was a technical.
All right, well, so what I'm saying is that originally there was a African and Indigenous alliance, and that we were both victims of the doctrine of discovery, but the Indigenous, of course, were first. And that gave the um, so-called people who invaded America the right to do what they did. And that was the European Church granting them the right to anyone who wasn't European or indigenous. They were only occupants. They had no right of ownership to the land, which indigenous people didn't believe in owning their mother anyway. But there was, when I say there were Indian and there was Indians, and there was once an alliance between African Americans, and I give much praise to our Indian brother, Chief John Marks, and and love his outreach for Indians and Africans in America. Uh, those indigenous people who became, in my reading, addicted to European trade goods would hunt Africans. Later on, they would enslave Africans. They had became addicted to the invasion of that. But those Indians that remained traditional, they lived under the warrior's code. I'm a warrior. Slavery, I don't have time to enslave someone. I'm not even a farmer. I'm hunting and I'm fishing and I am doing what a warrior does. But coming up to today in Oklahoma, you have the 5 civilized tribes who they were part of Thomas Jefferson's program of civilization. After the Revolutionary War, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Henry Knox had a meeting and said, we have a country. Now, what do we do about the Indian problem? And they said, well, Jefferson says, well, let's civilize them. It would be too expensive to fight wars of extermination. Let's civilize them. And that civilization means they're gonna stop being warriors. They're gonna get a piece of land. We're gonna advise them to adopt slavery. Well, there were different levels and degrees of that. However, uh, that's where the name comes, the five civilized tribes of Native Americans, because those were the ones who had adopted American slavery under the direction of Benjamin Hawkins, who was a direct descendant of John Hawkins, who with Queen Elizabeth were the founders of slavery in the United States. Tell me when I'm going on too long. So I'm bringing this up to the fact that uh, after the Civil War, even before, there was a group called the Loyal Indians, and that was made up of those Indians that didn't want to go with the South, and Blacks who were within those tribes, predominantly Creek, Seminole, and later on some Cherokee and some other groups too. I see John Moss's name here. Should I stop and
No, go right ahead.
okay. And so then what happened is the greatest exodus from Indian country was made by John Horse and Wildcat. They left there in 1849 because I told you about how Blacks had won their freedom to go to Indian territory. But once they got there, the Attorney General, uh, 12 years later, said, no, we're not going to recognize battlefield legislation. You're fair game for slave hunters. And so the John Horse, go to johnhorse.com, you'll get the whole story, along with Kawakache and some of my Fixico ancestors. Uh, they, they, uh, um, they formed a group that was the biggest exodus of people running from slavery to a foreign country. And that occurred in 1849, Wildcat and John Horse. And when they crossed over into Mexico, those are the people that they welcome with open arms. And some of them, my cousins, are still there in the city of Nacimiento de los Negros in Coahuila. And they came back to become the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts after the Civil War. And so today, though, there's only one nation among the five civilized tribes, and that's the Cherokee, who has recently agreed in their constitution to remove the word by blood and to respect the freedmen of that nation. After the Civil War in 1865, my great grandfather at the Fort Smith truce with the Blacks from the five civilized tribes, he was an interpreter. And that's where the truce came that would become the 1866 US Treaty that granted full membership and citizenship and all equal rights, being the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment to Black Indians, but it was not honored completely in various degrees. The Seminoles honored it mostly, the Creeks next, the Chickasaw and the Choctaw, no, but not at all, hardly. But now the Cherokees have come along, and it looks like with the chief, Bob Hoskins, they want to do the wise thing and bring Blacks in as equal partners. So, do I have questions on or comments on what I've said?
This is Anyanu. I have a couple questions. Just because I've heard a little bit of, I mean, most of what you've said, I haven't heard, but I've heard a little bit. So I wanted to confirm a couple things and ask a question. So someone said in terms of the 5 civilized tribes that they also required to be Christian. Was that part true?
Yes, they used Christianity was a form of, like I said, they became addicted to the European trade goods and the European ways of life. So how the Christianity, that even started with the Spanish in the mission era. But if you go to the Southwest, uh, typically a adventurer who was not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, he had to go to, he couldn't go to New York, Philadelphia and expect to rise. So he would come to the Indians in the Southwest, and he would find a woman in that tribe who was of high, a Wind Clan woman, like my great grandmother. That meant that her children by her could become a chief. He would marry these women, maybe have children, and maybe a young child he may send away to Savannah or to Charleston until he got old enough to look at some white women. Then he'd have to bring him back to the tribe. So Christianity was a part of it, and them adopting enslavement and being willing to be farmers who own slaves. Their type of slavery was another part of it. Yes, it was a long answer, but yes.
No, that's fine. My last piece is that um, it was my understanding there were funds that not obviously not adequate, but some funds that are and privileges that go to indigenous people. Do any of the funds in some of these cases you're talking about each year, and I don't even know if it's each year, I just saw, heard it somewhere, so you can clarify, do any of those, are they shared with those who are like the Black Indians or the uh, they call it biracial or whatever, you know what I'm
Well,
asking?
they call it the so-called freedmen in among the civilized tribe. This is the big issue now. The fact that indigenous tribes are counting the freedmen because in the 1866 U.S. Indian Territory Treaty, an official treaty that is even over legislation, because that's between two, a nation to nation, that they were supposed to get equal rights and all the benefits. But what has been happening is they're counting the freedmen, and then when they get appropriations, they don't share it with them. Even the latest lady, I had to go on a little campaign, who Deb Haaglund, in December 2019, when she was a congresswoman, she helped co-sponsor a bill that removed Black freedmen from housing protection on, on reservations. And so when Biden went to her, people who don't know the inside story, oh, wow, well, this is wonderful. This is great, you know. But the truth of the matter is the freedmen are in a battle to receive their share. And in most instances, in practically no instance, have they received their fair share among the 5 civilized tribes.
Thank you. Thank you.
So comment, question, are you ready for the next speaker, or should I continue, or?
Phil, this is John Moss.
Yes, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Hey, there we are.
Yeah, there we are.
And I love you, my brother. I love you, my indigenous brother, because you are here with us. We're still in our freedom fighting society, and I love you.
I love you too, and thank you. And yes, we are. And so a lot of the things, there's really nothing wrong you said. It's just to add to that is that the Cherokee Nation and Deborah Holland just approved their newest constitution, and in from Chief Chuck Hotchkins, and in that they do and have in verbiage, like you mentioned, they have openly acknowledged the mixed race, that if they have provable lineage, then yes, they are brought into the rolls. Now, and payouts and benefits that as tribal members, federally recognized tribal roll members would get, those ones that have been or are being recognized, that means they get their per cap money. It means that the stimulus dollars that were broken up, I think theirs was $2,500 per member, and that includes children all the way through elders. And then the medical for Indian Health Services, which is huge for our nations. And yes, all that still needs to be corrected with everyone else, but they do get those benefits. And yes, sadly, as an example, on our team who we're working with closely, and why I moved back out here predominantly to Lawton, Oklahoma from Huntington Beach, California, by the open ocean, is that, and mountains, is that in Fort Coffee, Oklahoma, up by Tulsa, the mayor Robala, Muhammad Robala, from Fort Coffee, we with Friends of the African Union have been working towards a holistic approach for a proven template through NCRC and others to get funding and you know, improve upon all of this. Well, Mr. Robala is also on, and his lineage goes back to where he should be being recognized by the Muskogee Creek. The Muskogee Creek are not recognizing the mixed races and openly acknowledging the Freemans and Native Americans. So he is still on his lands, but is he getting proper benefits as he should be? No. And or family proven recognition. And that's true for many nations. And sadly, the 5 civilized tribes have not stepped up as much as they should, other than the Cherokee and or some of the other tribal nations. I'm honored my Caddo Nation never did have that issue. As a matter of fact, and it's in a treaty, and this is what I mentioned at the World Conference of Mayor meeting up at the Tulsa. We just recently had our Chamber of Commerce meeting for all of Oklahoma, all the chapters, where I'm the Southwest chapter president. But I mentioned the Caddo Treaty of 1835, which supersedes all these other agreements, including McGirt, and where my great-great-grandfather, Chief Oat, signed the treaties between the U.S., where they were asked before 1835 to start allowing some of the indigenous nations to come to what was then recognized as Indian territory, so that they wouldn't be completely genocide. And this was in the original plan, was being told to my elders as through our family been passed down, that this will allow time for us to figure out where exactly we need to have them. So that's where the Trail of Tears started, where tribal nations like the Delaware were moved from, you know, up in New York area, all the way down here to by my tribe now, who's in Bangor, Oklahoma, which is, you know, almost in Texas. And Texas is also Caddo lands where my great-great-grandfather, Chief Blue, signed that treaty of the Louisiana Peace Treaty. But the Treaty of 1835 specifically states that we in good spirit are allowing these nations to come to these lands and live under proper guidelines to care for the land and people and one another, and for us all to get along in that spirit. But it also stated we never gave up our rights to ownership of all these lands. So if McGirt is true, where they're saying that over half of Oklahoma, all of the civilized tribes in eastern Oklahoma are still sovereign, completely sovereign tribal nations, and then what supersedes that, which will come out eventually, is the Caddo tribe treaty, which supersedes those and is still on the books. But the reality is we all need to, as all of us in this group are here and recognizing the positive things that's happened with the Buffalo Soldiers, the positive things that have happened with African-American, maroon, mixed bloods across the nation, as well as indigenous peoples. And Elder and Ms. Cox, regarding your question of Christianity, yes, that was part of the original documentation. However, in the approved Constitution of the Cherokee and many of the updated bylaws and constitutions of the tribes, it does not state that. It is based on blood quantum and so forth, because again, we have our cultural beliefs and religions that spirituality, if you will, that we have always followed, even though we, like myself, also believe and accept Christianity, Jesus and Christianity and so forth, but we may recognize it through other names, just as many nations do. But that is not part of that. And part of all these funds with the Friends of the African Union regarding dollars in the Biden, what he's saying he'll release this time that he and Obama did not 2 terms prior, which he's admitted, and he's saying, help me get in again, and we will. Well, we're working to make, help him keep his word, if you will. But the reality is that in those documents, as Herschel shared, any nation that does not accept or puts racism towards people that can prove their lineage, they will not have access to those dollars. So those set-asides of trillions of dollars that do not affect the American debt load or EBITDA, right, in banking terms, but in those factors, it does not affect any of the US debt at all. These are set-asides that have been there. Common way to think of that is we've all heard of people that have taxes that are owed back to them, but they can't find or get a hold of the people. Well, those taxes are in a trust account gaining interest. So when they do find them, they may have had $40,000 due to them, but by the time they find them, it might now be up to $60,000. That's how the set-aside dollars work in the trillions. And through NCRC and private partnership banking agreements that FAU with us as co-partners and others already have in place right now. It is not, we need to, we're going to, they're in place. They're signed documents, and you can look them up, as have been mentioned on our regular conference calls that take place every night. So I just wanted to share all that tie-in to what is going on with the Freemans the McGirt case, the 5 civilized tribes, and others, because as it states, again, there's over, I believe it's 29 tribes in Oklahoma, and the majority of them would not have even been here had it not been for my great-great-grandfather having an open heart to allow them. But of course, they were, I'm sure, under pressure. And I do know, I just want to state, while it's recorded, family history shows that even when we did receive the payment from the United States of what we were agreeing to do and move aside but not give up our rights for the land, the payment was corns that had boll weevils and other things that wasn't even healthy. And then we received, think about this, some of the rifles for hunting, there was no firing pin. So where is the Native American in the plains of Oklahoma and Texas, et cetera, gonna make a firing pin so now they can hunt? So a lot of them used them just like clubs to get animals or whatever. But it was never even properly, the agreed amount was never properly done. And sadly, the genocide of blankets that were even given with smallpox and so forth added to the genocide of millions of our indigenous people passing on. So
A quick question is that along with the 5 civilized tribes, because again, I get on a lot of different things and I hear what in terms of tracking a lineage, I was my understanding that there were also groups of whites who signed on for $5. I think, I don't know if this is a offensive term or not, but they talk about $5 Indians, people who were not indigenous. How do they prove their lineage if they in fact were not, their ancestors just signed on, if the story is true? So that's the other thing. The other thing before I shut up is maybe at some other point when we talk about economics, I'm interested also in the structure of some of the banks that I've heard about that are not tied to the Federal Reserve, if that is true.
Yeah. Chief John.
I appreciate the recognition, but I'm not officially a chief. So,
Okay.
but I respect the honor. Go ahead.
I think I should answer that question. And it'll take me a couple of minutes. I had as I say, I have 354 blogs. Here's something that, first of all, to comment on what you said, is the freedmen, they get some benefit, but it's Jim Crow. You spoke about the Indian Health Division, like on the recent shot for COVID. The by blood members could go to the Indian Services Clinic and get a shot without an appointment. The freedmen were told, you got the wrong kind of card. I'll stop there and let me begin my explanation to the elder. What do you do when you only have oral history? When by blood Indians reject attempts by Black Indians to join their nation, Blacks usually respond in one of 4 ways. They return to their former group. They poise, they say, well, I know I am. Or they do anything they can to attempt to assimilate. Or I'm a proponent of transcendence. I have the necessary documentation and evidence linking me to a direct ancestor on the Dawes Roads, yet I have not applied for membership, and I remain in solidarity with those who only have oral history and are receiving Jim Crow treatment, even though they are on the Freedmen Roads. I further believe that anyone who wants to celebrate their culture shouldn't hesitate. And I believe that we need under the Department of Interior, we need a Black Bureau of Indian Affairs. It's not going to happen for us that specifically follows the doctrine of the ruling of the 1866 U.S. Treaty. Finally, Native Americans make up about 2%, correct me if I'm wrong, of the US population, and African Americans represent maybe about 13%. My experiences lead me to believe that 60% of African Americans think they have either Native American ancestry or shared history. We undeniably have the numbers. So why don't we just start out using and enjoying the culture while we work to create our own groups? We can do this by beginning an all-inclusive cultural renaissance, similar to the Harlem Renaissance. Instead of using the new Negro, the new protagonist is African, Native American, maroon, as clearly exemplified by the Smithsonian Institution's book, Indivisible. So I don't think it's ever gonna happen at this point. The Cherokee, Bob Hoskins, you know, that'll be beautiful. Just think if we can put the 2% of the indigenous people with the 13% of the forced nation together, we both are declining minorities. That will make us stronger and at least have the power of a swaying vote in a political election. So that I'm done unless it's more.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that. Andrew.
Briefly, you may add to that.
I don't remember how to do briefly, but no, I'm kidding.
I'll let you know.
I'm kidding. Thanks. So agreed. Sadly, the United States Congress is the only one that approves the Bureau of Indian Affairs constitution bylaws of the tribes. And they are the ones that put in place the Dawes Rolls and how we have to be registered and only federally recognized. The sad part, one of the other sad parts of that, and I'll use the Cherokee are one of the big examples. There was so much land grabbing and documents being burned and stolen, etc. And so a lot of the true bloodline nations have a hard time proving it. And sadly, there's with the monies and casino dollars and other things that are out there, there's a lot of infighting instead of uniting to disenroll members. And this is happening, as you know, in California with the San Manuel, Big Casino Ale Caliente, Morongo, etc., where members that were recognized for decades now have been disenrolled and have lost their rights of a federally recognized person. And similar, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people, Elder, did marry $5. You know, you move to Kansas or these other areas and you marry into the bloodline, then that should have helped you be recognized. But that wasn't always the case. In regards to build up your a Black Congress, if you will, the picture here of Jay Winter Nightwolf of us up at the United Nations in 2016, he started an organization, the Native, and I may say the name wrong because it's an acronym, Native American Black Indian Congress. And they have a Facebook page, they have information, but that is exactly what that is regards for mixed bloods to get their proper recognitions, which is part of why with Herschel and Queen Mother Blakely and all of us being there, Abram was at that meeting, correct, Avery? Abram?
Yes, I was there in attendance.
Yes. So, so all of those things, if that better answers some of those fill-in questions, but yes, it's an ongoing battle, and the recognition, some people think, well, if I go to ancestry.com, no, that has nothing to do with it. If you go through, if you want to send me an email, I have a booklet to help you find out your tribal lineage, but doesn't mean it's necessarily always going to be accepted. But one of the ways some of the tribes have been doing it is if you have your family tree verbally, and if you're wanting that type of recognition, as Bill said, respectfully, I know many, probably thousands of people that respectfully decline to buy into, I have to register as a native. But those things we can help with. But again, they look at, oh, well, my aunt knew her sister, and yes, she is on the roll. And then they check into it that way. And there have been some people accepted into the tribal roles that way, even though as an amendment to their constitution. So there's as brief as I could keep that, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay.
I see you're ready to throw something through the screen at my head.
May I
Thank you.
comment, or we had to, may I give a short comment?
Very short.
Okay, I'll make it no more than 2 minutes. I have a plan when I went to the United Nations, and this plan is, yeah, we've gotten off the topic, that since our indigeneity was completely destroyed as a kidnapped nation, all those who are documented descendants of slavery should receive similar to indigenous rights with sovereignty and special protections, and that the 400,000 acres that was turned over to 10,000 families, known as the 40 acres, should be divided into 8,000 acre plots in each of the 50 states, where we will have a mental health clinic. We'll be able to have a gambling, we'll be able to grow marijuana, we'll be able to do anything, and we will own it in common. I'll end it there.
Well, that was only 90 seconds.
Oh, okay. And so, well, all right. So what I'm saying is, because the main loss for us has been our connection with our culture, and if we have cultural mental health clinics in every state where we can go to land that we're protected on, because the allotment program of the DAWS program shows that when we receive reparations, other races get it who are more who come after it for us. So we have to have a way to keep that in by sovereignty, in the same type of relationship that indigenous people have. Okay, that's a minute.
Well, so if you have documentation that you can share with us, or again, in the chat, feel free to include it there, or send me an email. Well, all these are very relevant topics to what we're discussing today. I'm going to stop the recording now for this segment, and then we'll begin recording again. So let me do that.